Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning. Welcome to Elevator Systems, where we look at ideas and concepts from Bowen family systems theory in brief and understandable ways. Our next topic in relationships across the lifespan is stepfamilies. And Kathleen Cotter Cauley is here again today, and I know she has done a lot of thinking about this professionally and personally. So welcome back, Kathleen.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Kathleen is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice. She's been a faculty member of the Bowen Center since 2012 and was involved in founding the Florida Family Research Network. Her thinking on triangles, which will be pertinent today, I bet, is in a book called Triangles, Bowen Family Systems Theory Perspectives by the late Peter Teitelman. Kathleen has also been married for 40 years, is a stepmom and a stepdaughter, I believe, as well as a grandma. So, welcome, Kathleen. Do you want to jump in with your pitch?
Okay. Well, I think that stepfamilies provide an amazing opportunity to think theory because they can be so daunting and intimidating with the number of people coming together that people get overwhelmed. So I think this is not, I didn't get to my pitch yet, Dixie. So my pitch is this: lower the anxiety and work at differentiation of self, kind of a simple principle. Lower it in self and watch it, in the system. Think theory and a path will emerge, and it's an ongoing opportunity to work at maturity. It's not for everybody, but it's really an ongoing effort at being mature. That's period. Excellent. End of sentence.
End of sentence.
All
Off
right.
the elevator.
Off the elevator. Okay, so I will throw mine out there. I thought a lot about different ones. And the concepts I want to think about, one that we kind of talk around in Bowen theory is this idea of, I'm going to talk about boundaries and triangles. So I was thinking about, I thought we talked lots about triangles today, so I didn't spend as much energy there. I was thinking about Dan Paparow's assessment guide around, he has various categories, which we can link the article here. And specifically the category around connectedness and integration, I was thinking about. I don't have any personal experience in a stepfamily, but I sit with a lot and have sat with lots of stepfamilies over the years. And I was thinking about how useful it is for a stepfamily when I'm sitting with them to assess or think with them about how open is the communication or how cut off they are from one another. And the extended family. And I thought that was useful. So when I think about boundaries here, I want to think about how do these family members think about relationship in this family in the midst of being aware and recognize all the triangles that they're in. And I'm going to skip Dixie for a second because I have a quote that I'm going to throw in because I thought it did such a good job of, I think one of the things I sit with families about is just the recognition of what they are up against, getting factual about what you're up against. And, as the first marriage, so this is a quote from McGoldrick and Carter, my favorite family life cycle book, as the first marriage signifies the joining of two families, so a second marriage involves the interweaving of 3, 4, or more families whose previous life cycle family course has been disrupted by death or divorce. So complex is the process whereby the remarried family system stabilizes and regains its forward developmental thrust that we have come to think of this process as adding a whole additional phase of the family life cycle for those involved. And I thought that was just useful to name that this is an additional phase for a family that will be probably based on some of the thinking of how they did this the first time, but different. So as usual, there's my long pitch with a quote.
A good quote, yeah. Well, my pitch was, I'll start short and then I'll elaborate. Staying in your lane while merging onto a 4-lane superhighway reconstruction.
Ooh.
That was my first thought. And so I said, with stepfamilies, you have long-standing roles and patterns that shift. New triangles of time, attention, money, allegiance show up. There's the anxiety of adjustment and expectations and different levels of maturity of those involved. Staying in your lane doesn't mean you're passive or you're only thinking about yourself. Instead, maturity or differentiation in step families means being interested in how this group is going to figure things out over time, managing one's own anxiety when tensions pick up, and being a leader who knows when to step back and be confident in the ability of others to work things out between them. So that was mine. From the Marie Bowen Archives Project, there's a quote from a letter from 1989, which people can go find out the context, but here it is. One cannot pretend a zebra is a mule by painting out the white stripes. Period. Then we need to go and read more around that.
So that's your teaser. It's a teaser quote this time.
Yeah. To get people to dig into the archives. And then another letter. Then time is devoted to the part this one plays in the family system and some fundamentals of differentiating an I out of the we-ness of the family system and to changing the part that self plays in the system. And then I found an article called On Step Parenting from the Family Systems Forum that I will link to, where Dr. Roberta Gilbert just answered some questions about how theory relates to this part of life. And she says the most important difference between natural and step parenting is the emotional intensity and negative perceptions that can become attached to the job. If the parents, as leaders of the family, can manage their own intensities with each other and with their offspring, staying in good contact with their generations and keeping both eyes on differentiation of self, there is no reason why step families can't meet any and all of their challenges and surpass them. And then I do have all of the bullet points, but I won't maybe go further. But
Okay.
What do you guys notice in all of that?
Oh boy, I would speak to the complexity that people probably don't fully understand at the beginning until they're in it. It's like anything else. It's if you have a family plan that you make in your office about when you're going home to visit on a vacation, on a family trip. You don't have any idea till you step into the family what will activate in the triangles in the way the week unfolds. I think step families are like that. It's a very nice idea. People have a lot of romantic ideas about this at all ages, not just younger people, but older people who are marrying will say, well, I have 6 children and he has 5, but they're all raised. And it's going to be us for the most part. Now, that's a complete myth. So as a coach, I used to say, I still say, you've come to the wrong place. You're not going to like what I have to say, because there's that much more tradition, that history that those adult children have that they bring to the table, expectations about holidays and what will unfold and how will they be grandparents and will they still visit me in the same way that they used to. So I think just grounding people in the reality of staying curious, and it takes a long time to really get to know people, to find out about how they're thinking, how they think this family should look. There's a lot of places to apply theory. You know, and the place I start is always with the family diagram, because it's a visual and people can look at that picture and see from the view of their children or grandchildren, oh, wait a minute. In this marriage now, there can be 8 or more grandparents. Who will get to be the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the cousins, and the sibling position that changes? So an oldest of sisters might become the younger sister of brothers in this family that is now coming together. So I think the diagram really helps people with the reality of how many players there are, and that there's no such thing as a quick fix. You know, coaches give way too much advice, if you ask me, and about what to do, how to behave, what the solutions are. And Bowen theory would say that if you really think as a coach that the family is going to be an expert on how it evolves, then that will come through in your curious questions, that you really don't know what's going to happen here. And what you do know is a theory, and you also know that it's going to take a long time for them to, quote, feel like a family.
Yeah,
I'll
I
stop.
appreciate like that reality. I think that that's a lot of what I think that the diagram is so useful for, is just kind of clicking in some reality checks for the family about what's involved. I mentioned, I think briefly, but I think person-to-person relationships was one of the things that I was reading through Dan Paparo's work. And I just think, when you put all those extra people in the family, getting to know, some of the questions he, asked is like, kind of, do you know what's happening in their world? What are these other folks up to? And I think that takes time to establish those relationships. So patience is something I think that is always hard for me and others, and how to think through that. The other two things I found so useful that were said by other people were, Dixie, your idea of leadership, I think you put in there, is I think that it is useful to think about when rejoining families, is who is the leader in this system? Who was the leader in the previous systems? How is that shifting and changing as they're integrating this new system? And that differentiating an I out of the we-ness. Because I think what you alluded to, Kathleen, is this family is trying to develop a we-ness as they form together.
Yeah, sometimes too quickly. Like let's say you'll get a parent who really wants his adult children to like the stepmother. And it's way too much intensity from that parent, silent and not silent, but really wanting them to get along. That's the last thing the adult children are interested in, is forming a new family as they're launching out. But if that's not communicated clearly, then everybody's kind of awkward. There's tension. Nobody knows quite how to behave. So I think there is this post-death or divorce chapter that's really key to look into. So that as a coach, you look at the original family, and then you look at what happened when a parent died or there was a divorce. Those kids often spent, at any age, more time with the living parent. In my case, my father was 7 years a widower after my mother died, and she was 49. He was in his 40s. But so he was alone, and we did a lot of stuff with him. We were adult offspring, and we would go away and go skiing and just kind of hung with our dad, and it was a lot of fun. And then he married somebody who was around for 40 years, including 20 years after he died. And she was not all that interested in us. I mean, really, she was not that. She was very interested in him and very interested in the marriage. And so all of a sudden, after that 7-year chapter, we felt like little kids, and we weren't. We were in our 20s, but we felt like we were in the outside position, because we were with a person who wasn't all that child focused. It was like, oh no, what have you done, Dad? I mean, so that lived itself out. And I got to know her very, very well, especially after my father died and the triangles were, may he rest in peace. The triangles were quieter about, her whole view of what it was like to come into a child-focused family when she really just preferred her man. So anyway, there's a lot of ways it can unfold, but knowing what went on before the marriage happened is really key for people.
Yeah. I appreciate that one. The other one I was thinking about when it was the we that I sit a lot with families is when a remarriage occurs during adolescence, when the children are adolescent. And I think the complexity of an individual child, an adolescent attempting to begin to launch themselves and distance themselves from a family, and a pressure to pull back in, and just sitting and thinking with families about that is so useful.
What do you find that you ask, Katie? I mean, do you ask how they envision this family that's about to unfold? What kinds of questions do you ask as a coach?
I will say, Kathleen, I very rarely get the luxury of speaking to the people before.
Yeah. Okay.
Before. So often I am speaking to people. I mean, I guess this is the challenge of therapy. All of you out there maybe go in before and do some planning. But I often will see people when it's firing off, when, there's challenge, so just thinking about with these folks about what are their expectations around an adolescent and how much an adolescent spends with their family. What were your expectations in your own growing up families about how much time, which is so useful to people because they'll say, I never wanted to be at home, right? Often, or like sometimes, like I'd come home for dinner, but I was out with my friends and doing that. So I think what happens is it becomes not a criticism of the parent that the adolescent is out wanting to be social and with friends, working through that challenge of if they could open that relationship a little bit and be less rigid about some of the boundaries, some of the things that they're wanting from this person. I think that that's been useful. I don't know that I gave you a question, but that's how I'm thinking about just the history is always so useful for people. I think just to pull themselves out of that relationship and think about, the past and the relationships that existed before.
And that, to your point, Katie, being free to talk about those people in the past. You'll hear a lot of stories of a new partner coming in wanting no pictures, wanting no discussion of a mother who died or a father who died. That is so unrealistic. That if the spouse who lost the spouse agrees to that in a new marriage, it can be very difficult for the adult offspring or the little children if they can't talk about their mother who died when she was, let's say, 39 years old, because it's threatening. This is what I mean by maturity. A person should not marry into a family where there's been a death if they're not willing to work on their own maturity.
Yeah, which brings me, because it fits so well here, I'm going to pop in my example and then I will stop talking for a while, is I said one of the examples I had was the movie Stepmom. And I think one of the most beautiful scenes, so Julia Roberts, Susan Sarandon, one of the most beautiful scenes I feel like in that movie is when they're sitting at the table after sorry, spoiler alert, but it's an old movie, after she's been diagnosed with cancer, and Julia Roberts is the stepmom, and they have this scene about the daughter's wedding and how they have these projections about who the daughter is and isn't going to be thinking about. And I just think the ability that these two women, as this woman is dying, to be able to have that conversation, I just think that is so useful. I would imagine, they don't tell you what happens in the future, but to the future generations of this family, to be able to say, here's what I was worried about. And then if this mom does die, which they kind of make it seem like she's dying, for that stepmom to hold that information, here's what your mom was thinking about.
Good example. And I think that even if the women don't know each other, let's say there's a mother who died and a stepmother. Well, I'll use my own example. I'm a stepmother to a wonderful woman who's now in her early 50s, who was 12 when I met her. And she has 3 children in her marriage who are in their early 20s. And she insisted that I call them my grandchildren, not my step-grandchildren, which was a compliment. I'd known her for many, many years. But the mother of those children is still alive and not very involved, of the grandchildren and of my stepdaughter. She's always been in my head. No matter how little she has been involved, I don't ever deal with my stepdaughter that I'm not thinking of her mother, because I know my stepdaughter is always thinking of her mother and wishing she was more involved in it, that it had been different in many ways. And so I think that even if you don't know the players, if you're a step parent, you can keep the players, hold them close in your head, theoretically, because you're always up against these triangles, and it makes it so much clearer if you're thinking about the triangles. You're talking to the stepchild, but you're thinking of her mother. Very important.
Yeah. I was thinking about, in that Roberta Gilbert article, she talks about how stepchildren are viewed by step-parents, and parents may intensify focus, creating problems. And I was thinking of the classic wicked stepmother example that's in like every Disney princess movie. And I think, Kathleen, you had alluded to creating this utopian kind of new family and the reality of that. And then on the flip side is this wicked stepmother whose intentions are so selfish. And I think that's where people go under anxiety, is sort of the all or nothing. And I think that Bowen theory helps people to think through, these are the facts. These are the different things that people in the system are up against. My other example, if we want to keep going with utopian examples, was the Brady Bunch.
Yes.
Which I mean, I'm a little bit young for that, but I do remember watching it a little bit. But I found a clip where Carol Brady is speaking to one of her stepsons. She says, "The only steps in this house are," and then she turns the boy to look at the staircase, "are those." So there's no stepchildren. And I'm like, and there are stepchildren.
Yeah.
So what do you do when mom says there's no stepchildren and the angsty, I don't know, Marsha girl thinks there are stepchildren or is left out? And how do you manage all those different perspectives?
Yeah.
I think you just spoke to the complexity, and some of the assumptions that can go on in the group are, who is this person that my parent brought in here? In their head, who is that? I don't care about this person. He married her or she married him, but I don't care about them. I mean, this is where it's important to get at people's thinking, because I think it takes a lot of curiosity in a group where the motivation can be very low to find out about people. So as a coach, let's say the coach might say, how about if you got to understand your stepmother a little bit better, or your stepfather? Get curious, maybe go visit their family. Why would I want to do that? I'm busy. Why would I want to do that? Well, if people are thinking Bowen theory, they're probably not going to say that. They might say, I don't have time. But it does take that curiosity to get out of the assumptions and to work at something where you don't really feel like it. Frankly, I think a lot of the time people don't really feel like it. And they're not as invested often as they are in their own original biological, this is how we did Thanksgiving. Come on.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by it's not for the faint of heart, but also it does require maturity, and you can become a really flexible person. You can become a very curious and interested person if you want to work at an experiment where you're really going to have to grow as a person. I mean, that's what I would say to people entering a blended family. If you really want to work out in not getting your way, not understanding what's going on, feeling stunned a lot, feeling surprised a lot. What do you mean they're not coming to this graduation? What do you mean they're not coming for Christmas? Are you kidding me? There's a lot of that.
Yes.
And it's so hard to, I sound very discouraging, don't I? But there's just a lot of reality.
Yes.
That's it's an opportunity to grow if people want to see it
observe yourself. I think I would add to that. I think Bowen theory, there's a saying in Bowen theory about, you got to turn the heat up a little to see some of these patterns at work. And man, there is nothing that turns up the heat a little than I think, blended parenting. I think it allows such opportunities when I'm sitting with these parents together about what got stirred up for you, what did you notice, what did you expect of the other parent? I mean, that's such a useful workout with a couple who's raising children together, is to say, what did you notice about your functioning in your previous co-parenting relationship? Because I think where people get stumped is when, for instance, the parent that is no longer in the household was the one who went in and gave the final word, right? Like I could be the kind, softer parent, and then this other parent would come in and say, that's enough. And you turn towards your new spouse expecting them to step in the same way. And then maybe they were also the parent who had a different person who stepped in and did that work. So just going through being curious about that functioning, noticing what comes in automatically, notice where you have a little flexibility in yourself. Like you said, Kathleen, I think those are such useful conversations.
Really a good description there, Katie. And I'm thinking of the parent who comes in to see the coach and they say, my wife, my daughter, they're fighting. And the coach says, what are they up against with you? What do you mean, me? What do you it's very hard for people to see what you're talking about there, the leadership that they have to step into for their child of any age with their new partner in order for that partner and that adult or young child to get on with each other. So, yeah, the intensity of the expectation also, the intensity for, but I want you to get along. I want you to like her. She's really nice. Well, yeah, I remember my stepmother saying to us adult children at one point, your father, I'm sure I've said this before on a video, your father wants me to love all of you. And frankly, I'm trying to decide if I even like you.
I love
We
that.
always, but that was on the table.
Yeah.
She was clear. She was vocal and clear. We were horrified. How could you not like us?
Right. Well, and even that comment, your father wants me to, right? And I was thinking, Kathleen Smith has this great article talking about the cycle of overfunctioning to distance. And how well does it work when someone says you two better love each other, or you two better get along, and then throwing your hands up and just not caring anymore, presumably not caring anymore. But that idea of what does leadership look like, of being invested without controlling?
Yeah.
Being interested.
Yeah.
How will you guys figure this out without taking over and without ignoring it?
And I think this is where getting as much information about all the units coming together is so important. If you just think of the families and emotional unit, and then you think of all the units that are coming together, getting information about them helps you understand what people are up against, and just in terms of togetherness and separateness. If that isn't defined clearly, then people that have a lot of togetherness in their unit and are now in this different blended family, it can feel like a very foreign land. But it takes time, and it takes interest in how are people thinking about it. And people don't always have those skills, which is where the coaching can come in very handy.
And it's talked about so much in adoption, right? This kind of thing, and the not bringing in a child that is maybe disrupts the sibling order. But I don't know, we don't have
I
mandatory
think
coaching for step families.
No,
we
but
do
we have
not.
so many good ideas, though. I mean, like the nodal event, the idea of a nodal event when people enter or leave the system, and that every triangle changes, every relationship changes, even something as simple as that. Help people understand when they're kind of disoriented, like just feeling kind of off. I don't know how to behave is normal when things are just starting to emerge. And a lot of parents make the mistake of telling their children, nothing's going to be different.
Oh,
Well, I'm just going to be with this new person, but nothing's going to change. Right. I'm like, oh, don't ever say that, please.
Just your inheritance.
Yeah. Well, there is that money.
Yeah.
And I think, the other part to just name in this episode, maybe this is one for the hot topics of next season, but the complexity of that there can be a lot of other invited guests in this remarriage, like lawyers.
Right.
And, and extended family that have a lot to say about how this family is going to function and when they should function. And, I think just even the complexity of a custody arrangement, it limits the flexibility of a family sometimes, where, people aren't allowed to have conversations in some way because of the rigidity that has been dictated by someone else, So I think that there is a lot of different places to think about what each individual family is up against.
Well, and I think you also are pointing to the couple that are marrying are the weakest link in the history. And they bring all this history of loyalties that you're describing. Maybe lawyers, maybe loyalties, maybe people who've died, maybe a divorce. And the children are still in all those loyalties and history. So the couple needs time alone. And the reason for that is they've never been a couple who haven't had issues of children to discuss.
Yeah.
They've never been this neat unfolding, we fell in love and then we got married and then there was a baby that came 9 months later. It isn't that. It's a whole different picture, requires a whole other frame, but people often still try to keep the romantic love frame on this much more complex entity.
Kathleen, thank you for that. I'm such a visual learner, and I'm just thinking right now in my head about the usefulness of just drawing on a board. I love to draw on my board behind me in an office, and just drawing that. I think some people could probably, but the weakest link time-wise, like they have known each other the least potentially than all these other relationships, and just to diagram that for a remarried family,
Mm-hmm.
I just think puts more facts in their brains that could be helpful.
Yeah, and it would include how uncomfortable it is, tolerating discomfort is at the heart of it, what we would know as differentiation of self. And there's a lot of that, tolerating, oh, they're talking about their mother that died again.
Mm.
How do you welcome that with interest, and not try to push that away somehow? That was the past. People do all kinds of clever little sayings about it. Now,
Yeah.
enough of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And just as in divorce, children still go over to their other family and come back. So let's say there's a fabulous vacation that's been taken in the step family, and they feel guilty about that. Now they're going back to their original parent. There's not as much money perhaps in that household, and I'm not going to show pictures of this great trip I just took when my parents already feeling unsure about the fact that my dad just got married again. So these are all the ways to keep the
So good. I watched the show The Bear. I don't know if anyone likes it. And there was just such a good example about, I'm not going to spoil anything, I don't think here, but the dad, the biological father, holding a position to not give this kid the toy. Like you don't need this, you don't afford it. And then the stepdad gave it to her. And he was reliving this story to another person. And the other person was like, oh, like just what a tricky triangle to be in.
Around every corner.
Yeah.
Around every corner. And that's where to think theory is so key. If a person can keep the theory in their head while they're feeling all this emotion of being stunned and shocked and oh my God, then they just running through the 8 concepts can be helpful. Yeah. Sibling position. Okay, what's going on here? Oh, he was the oldest, now he's the youngest. Triangles. Okay, where are they? I'm talking to person A, but what are their connections? Just thinking the theory, because there's so much content in a blended family. You can't get lost in the content if you're a learner of the theory. Who said what? Who started it? Who's going to do what? Oh, I know what they're going to act like. You have to get away from all that and say, what does the theory say right here, right now? And it gives a framework to a person.
How do you, as the coach, I mean, I think that's a good, I'm thinking, I'm looking for ideas maybe. How do you as a coach, Kathleen, monitor yourself? Because I do think that thing you named is so important about the level of content that comes when working with a blended family. How do you keep yourself on track? What are some of the ways the tools or whatever, or things you use to think through that?
Well, I think theory a lot. And then I'm always thinking of my own original triangles in my own family, which was not a step family. And the expectations the coach has coming down the generations through their own family. What did women behave like? What did men behave like? How did mothers function? How did fathers function? And that's coming into the office if I'm not clear about really learning about what the triangles were. Was I favored in that group? Was I special in that group? Now I have this step parent that kind of could take me or leave me. What am I up against here? So if that work isn't being done, I don't think the coach gets curious enough about what to ask. To your point, Katie, I think you have to know what your own principles are in the office about the neutrality and being neutral enough to be curious, to even think of the questions, and knowing where you're stuck, and knowing. I mean, for me, it was I did not have a roadmap at all from my original family. So that was the learning curve, was to be in coaching, to learn about that and what I brought to the table.
Because I appreciate that mention of neutrality. I think this is for a clinician working with families in this in this area can be very, man, you have a billion invitations to take some sides.
Isn't that, can you say more about that? I think this is where clinicians do give quick advice and try to help too much and try to solve too much. Well, maybe you could do this. And instead of being quiet, regulating and tolerating. But I think there's a lot of people that get so stuck.
So stuck in the, don't you think, what do you think about this? You said last week, last week that we should work on thinking about ourselves and observing ourselves. And she wasn't doing that.
Some really immature people out there.
Really. As the coach is doing the same thing.
Yeah. So many invitations. I just think it's this to me, like you said, is such an area where it is so critical that the clinician do their own work and be working on differentiation in their own system to see the things.
And how that relates. What would you tell people about why does that even matter as a coach?
Yeah, I would name two things for me that I've found useful. One, you just said, I am always blown away by the new questions and observations that come to me when I have kind of an insight into my own functioning in my family. Like, I'm always blown away to kind of see a triangle or think about a triangle that I hadn't seen before. I've joked with supervisees, I think it's almost magical, but we won't want to say that. But, but it just is so interesting that, I could have a trip home, have done some work, come back and sit with the same family and say, oh, I didn't ever think about, that situation. So that's useful. And also, I think, especially with my physiology, I think doing work on your own family can give you cues into your own reactivity in ways that if I'm not doing that work, I don't see it as well. I don't notice ways that my body tells me I'm less neutral.
Well, I think that's right. I had to look myself at, I had a mother who was the youngest of 5. She was so much fun and she died young, and I was used to just getting along with her. And so I was up against a lot with a stepdaughter and a stepmother with too much intensity. I had too much over positive. This is going to be great. It's going to be really great. So that when both of them would be like, oh, no. I had to, oh my God, what's the problem? Oh, I'm the problem. I'm the problem in that I'm coming toward them with too much positive expectation. And if they're not interested in that, now what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to my original family and in coaching and think about, what am I going to do here? I don't know about this. I don't know about 2 women being like not that involved. And so the more I worked over the years, then both my stepdaughter and my stepmother got interested in me as I was kind of moving on. I was like, oh, there they are. Well, I was the problem.
Right.
Dixie, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think those positions, the roles in the family, like what you're both speaking to of what am I? Well, I'm a musician, right? So I say, what have I practiced? What have I practiced in my family? And when it's different and I need to go, I play the drums and I play piano, but guitar makes no sense to me. And if I go into a family where I'm expected to play the guitar, it's just going to be so awkward, right? And there's nothing wrong with playing guitar. I just haven't done that before. And so what is that? How does that adjustment work for everyone? And each person in the family will have that too, right? The different roles that are shifting. And
do you think, honestly, that we've talked everybody out of ever thinking about doing something like this? I like to think of it as a reality check.
Then that would be my hope. My hope is that it doesn't steer people away, because I just actually think that's not happening. I mean, I think people are going to repartner. We're a pair bonded species. We like pair bonding. And so I think it's just, hopefully, I think just having that reality check, getting some facts about what this system is up against and how do you want to be with those challenges.
Yeah, I think one we haven't mentioned, and it's probably been mentioned in other forums, is a couple who meet at work and have an affair, and then they both get a divorce, and they'll come to see the coach and say, well, the kids kind of know that we met at work, but they'll learn to accept this. And I say, all bets are off there. No, they may never, because 2 marriages ended in that affair. And in the mind of young children, that was the chance for their parents to reconcile. And so you represent the lack of that chance. Now, again, people don't like that statement, but then they can navigate around that. They can say, oh, okay, I have to be very clear that it might be a number of years until they grow up and understand that these things happen. We're human beings, but I can't just expect that to be instantaneous.
Yeah.
Any other quick takeaways for people? Things I can link to? I mean, I think there's lots of things to think about, but
I think we've said a lot.
My takeaway was just, just thinking about the energy to get to know these people that you've, I think there is usefulness in that, no matter what, is to just get interested in getting to know these people that you are now in a family with.
Mm-hmm. And knowing how much we're all invested in our own ways and our own traditions and what's always been, it takes an open mind to say, probably none of that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And how do I let go of that? And move with interest to this new group. Having a spiritual life is pretty helpful to the equation. One way, whatever ways people can manage to get a broader view, calm themselves down, think about, I'm not getting my way. What does that mean? How do I regroup here? Really having some of those individual practices that matter to people in terms of giving grace to oneself and to other people, that there's a lot of place to make mistakes in step families, and letting people do that and move forward.
Yeah. We don't say enough probably about people's practice, personal practice for whatever it is, spiritual, some good health and fitness stuff to calm you down. I think that's a really good reminder at the end here.
Going in equipped.
Yeah.
Right. And we know it's challenging enough just with biological families, let alone when you bring 2, 4, 6, 8
those other people
together.
Bringing those other people in. Who are those people?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for being here again today, Kathleen. And I hope people take a whole lot of ideas to think about as you go out into your family, step family, all the relationships. This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.